Emma's phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and she knew before she looked at it. She had been knowing things about Ryu Junho before she could explain them for long enough now that it didn't surprise her anymore. She looked at the screen anyway. His name. She picked up. "Hey," she said. Silence for a moment. Not the bad kind, just the kind that meant he was deciding how to arrive at something. "I need you," he said. 3 words. From a man who had spent his entire adult life needing nothing from anyone, and constructing himself carefully around that fact. Emma sat up in her bed, already reaching for the hoodie on her nightstand. "I'll be there in 25 minutes, she said. She was there in 22. "If you are new here, welcome, and you are going to want to go watch parts 1 and 2 first, because this is the finale, and it will hit so much harder if you know how we got here. And if you are a nestie who has been in this elevator since the beginning, this one is for you. Drop a comment before we even start and tell me, are you ready for the ending Emma and Junho deserve? Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and let's finish this story." His apartment was everything she had expected, and nothing she had been prepared for. Clean lines, high ceilings, one perfect plant on the windowsill that had clearly been chosen with intention. It smelled like him, something warm and understated. And Emma stood in the doorway for exactly 1 second, taking it in before she walked inside like she had always been going to end up here. Junho was at the window, charcoal coat still on, like he had come in and not been able to make himself do the next thing. He turned when she came in and looked at her the way he had been looking at her since an elevator on a morning that had rearranged everything, fully, without the composure layer he wore everywhere else. "You didn't have to come," he said. "You called me at midnight and said—" "You needed me," Emma said, dropping her bag on his sofa. "Did you think I was going to text back and ask if tomorrow worked?" Something moved in his face. Not quite a smile. Something quieter and more significant. He told her about Seoul. Not the professional version, the real one. The board meeting that had gone badly, the faction pushing for permanent restructure, his father's weight in the room sitting on every decision like a hand on a scale. The first time in his career he had pushed back on something his father wanted, and the specific cold silence that had followed. 3 weeks of being the most composed person in every room while something underneath that composure was pulling apart at the seams. Emma sat on his sofa and listened. She did not offer solutions. She did not tell him it would be fine. She just sat with him inside it, and let it be as heavy as it actually was, which was the thing she had that most people in his life had never given him. "He's not wrong," Junho said. "About the structure. The Seoul division needs leadership. He built it, and it needs someone who is actually there." "But it doesn't have to be you," Emma said. He looked at her. "There are other people in that company," she said. "You are acting like you are the only solution to a problem your father has decided only you can solve. That's not strategy. That's guilt." The room was quiet. "That was more direct than I expected," he said. "You called me at midnight," Emma said. "You got the midnight version of me." "She doesn't soften things." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he sat down, not across from her, beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. And for the first time since she had arrived, some of the tension in his body shifted. "I don't know how to do this," he said. It cost him something visible to say it. "I have known what was expected of me since I was 17 years old. I have never not known. And now I am sitting in my apartment at midnight telling a woman I have known for 4 months that I pushed back on my father for the first time in my life, and I don't know what comes next, and I—" He stopped. Emma waited. "I don't know what comes next," he said again, quieter. Emma looked at him. This careful, composed, quietly extraordinary man with the walls coming down in real time, and she said very simply, "That's okay. You don't have to know tonight." He looked at her. "Tonight you just needed to not be alone in it," she said. "That's why you called. That's why I came. The rest of it exists tomorrow." Something settled in his expression that she had never seen there before. Not resolution. Something earlier than that. Relief. The specific relief of a person who has put something down for the first time in a very long time. "Stay," he said. I just mean don't go yet. I wasn't going anywhere, Emma said. She went to work the next morning. This was not a small thing, and she knew it, and she went anyway, because Emma Banks had not survived a coffee explosion in a lobby, and 14 floors of stairs, and one catastrophic voice note, and the biggest campaign of her career to become a woman who put her life on hold for a man, even this man, even now. She kissed him on the cheek at 7:30 a.m., picked up her bag, and left him standing in his kitchen with coffee already made, and an expression she was going to think about all day. "Tonight?" he said. "Tonight," she confirmed, and walked out. She was at her desk by 8:45. Kemi had both headphones on. Emma sat down, opened her campaign document, and got to work. At 9:03 her phone buzzed, a message from Jun-ho. "Thank you." Emma looked at it. 2 words. From a man for whom 2 words were a speech. She put her phone face down on her desk and smiled at her monitor for a long moment. Then she got back to work. The promotion offer came on a Wednesday morning in Soo-yeon's characteristic style, delivered between 2 other pieces of information as though it were the same size as both of them. "The senior partner wants to meet with you at 10. Senior creative director position. Hanul account as permanent global retainer. Your own team." Emma wrote nothing on her notepad this time. She just looked at Soo-yeon. "Is that a problem?" Soo-yeon said. "Not even slightly," Emma said. Soo-yeon walked away. Emma turned back to her screen and sat very still for approximately 30 seconds. Then she picked up her coffee, took a long sip, and did not scream, which was the most professional thing she had done all week. She texted Toya under her desk like a person who had not just been offered everything she came here for. "Call me at lunch. No context, just call." Toya replied in 3 seconds. Emma. Emma put her phone away and went to her 10 o'clock. The senior partner's name was Park Ji-hoon, and he had the specific energy of someone who had built enough things to stop being impressed by most of them. He offered her the position directly, outlined the scope, and then sat back and waited. Emma asked 4 questions. Specific, strategic. The kind that told him she had been thinking about this longer than today. He answered all 4 and then said, "You're not going to ask about the salary." "I was getting there," Emma said. "I just wanted to make sure the job was worth the salary conversation first." Park Ji-hoon looked at her for a moment. Then he smiled, small and genuine, and told her the number. Emma maintained complete composure until she was back at her desk. "Kemi," she said. Kemi pulled one headphone off. "I need you to act normal for the next 4 hours," Emma said. "I will explain later." Kemi looked at her face, put her headphone back on, gave her a thumbs up. Emma faced her monitor and breathed. The evenings that week belonged to Jun-ho's apartment. Emma went after work, still in her blazer, campaign notes still in her bag, and something about the transition between the 2 spaces was becoming its own kind of rhythm. The office was hers. The evenings were theirs. Both things were true, and neither one canceled the other out. She cooked on Thursday. This was her idea, and she committed to it fully, and the results were exactly what anyone who had witnessed Emma's general approach to things would have predicted. "It's not burned," she said, looking at the pan with the specific optimism of someone redefining their terms. Jun-ho stood beside her and looked at the pan. "No," he agreed carefully. "It's just caramelized. On the outside." "Caramelized on the outside," Emma confirmed. "That's a technique." He moved her aside without making it a moment, just one hand at her waist, gently, shifting her to the left, and took over the pan with the quiet efficiency of a man who had decided this was the only available option. Emma leaned against the counter and watched him cook, and did not even pretend she wasn't enjoying it. "You could have told me 20 minutes ago," she said. "You seemed committed," he said. "I was committed." "I know." He adjusted the heat. "That's why I waited." Emma watched him move around his own kitchen, competent and unhurried the same way he was everywhere, and felt something settle in her chest that she had stopped trying to name because it was simply always there now. "The promotion," she said. He didn't look up from the pan. "Tell me." She told him everything. The meeting, the scope, the 4 questions, Park Ji-hoon's face when she asked them, the number. Jun-ho listened without interrupting, the way he always listened, fully, nothing missed. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. Emma stared at him. "What do you mean, you know?" "I flagged you before you were hired," he said simply, plating the food, with the same precision he brought to everything. "Did you think that stopped?" Emma picked up the nearest thing, a dish towel, and threw it at him. He caught it without looking up. She decided this was the most irritating and attractive thing she had ever witnessed in equal measure. "You could have just said, 'Congratulations,'" she said. He looked at her then, properly, with the full, steady attention that had never once gotten easier to receive. "Congratulations, Emma," he said. "You built something from nothing in a company that didn't know your name yet. That belongs entirely to you." Emma picked up her fork and looked at her plate because her face was doing the thing again. "The food is actually good," she said. "I know," he said. She threw the dish towel at him again. He caught it again. She gave up entirely. She fell asleep on his sofa on Friday evening mid-sentence, which was not a thing she had planned or would have agreed to if consulted. One moment she was telling Jun-ho about Adara's reaction to the promotion news. Adara had screamed, obviously. And the next moment the sentence simply ran out of road. She woke up to morning light and a blanket she had not put on herself, and coffee already made on the counter, and Jun-ho in the armchair across the room, dressed, reading, having apparently sat there while she slept without waking her or moving her or making it into something. Emma sat up, looked at the blanket, looked at him. He looked up from his book, said nothing, held out the coffee. She crossed the room and took it and stood beside the armchair and drank it in silence. And outside the windows the city was doing what cities do on Saturday mornings, and neither of them needed to fill it. "I have to go home and get changed," she said eventually. "I know," he said, "and water my plant. Okay? And call Toya. She's been texting me since Wednesday with increasing urgency." "Understandable," he said. Emma looked down at him. He looked up at her. The morning light came through the windows and sat on everything warmly, and she thought, not for the first time, but more clearly than ever before, that this was what it was supposed to feel like. Not performed, not negotiated, just this. "June," she said. "I know," he said quietly, like he had been thinking the same thing. She finished her coffee. She went home. She called Toya, who screamed for 4 minutes without interruption, and sat on her bathroom floor and smiled at the ceiling tiles that still needed regrouting, and felt completely, entirely fine. The knock on her apartment door came on Sunday afternoon. Emma was in her weekend clothes, oversized sweatshirt, bare feet, half her hair up and half of it absolutely not, eating cereal and watching something on her laptop that she would not be admitting to anyone. She was not expecting anyone. Jun-ho was supposed to come at 6. She opened the door. The man standing in her doorway was tall, composed, expensive coat, the specific gravity of someone who had built something significant and knew it. He had Jun-ho's jaw, obviously infuriatingly, and Jun-ho's eyes, and the same quality of stillness, except where Jun-ho's stillness had warmth underneath it. This man's had weight. He looked at her, at the sweatshirt, at the cereal bowl still in her hand. Emma looked at him. "You must be Emma," he said. His English was precise and unhurried, and she knew immediately, with complete and total certainty, exactly who she was looking at. She smiled the smile that had gotten her into trouble, and out of trouble in approximately equal measure her entire life. "Mr. Ryu," she said, "June isn't here yet. Do you want to come in?" Sung-jin stepped inside. Emma closed the door and looked at her cereal bowl and thought, well, Sung-jin sat at Emma's kitchen table with the stillness of a man who was accustomed to reading rooms and was currently reading this one very carefully. The apartment was warm and slightly chaotic in the specific way of someone who lived fully in their space. Books stacked on the coffee table with no particular system, A mood board pinned to the wall above her desk covered in campaign references and fabric swatches, and 3 different shades of the same color tested in brushstrokes. A plant on the windowsill that was thriving with the specific enthusiasm of something genuinely loved. A pair of trainers by the door, a jacket on the back of a chair. Her laptop open on the sofa with whatever she had been watching, still paused on the screen. He took all of it in without commenting. Emma put her cereal bowl in the sink, made him coffee without asking how he took it. She just made it the way Junho took it because it seemed like a reasonable inheritance, and set it in front of him. "Thank you," he said, with the slight surprise of a man who had expected to have to ask. "You're welcome," Emma said, sitting across from him with her own mug. "He didn't tell me you were coming." "He didn't know," Sung-jin said. "Ah," Emma said. They looked at each other across the table. Emma had the specific composure of someone who had once faced down a coffee explosion, a wrong elevator, a catastrophic voice note, and Mireille, all in the same job, and had come out the other side with her dignity approximately intact. A father in her kitchen on a Sunday afternoon was well within her range. "How long are you in the city?" she asked. "That depends," he said, in a way that was not quite an answer. "On Junho?" He looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes at the ease with which she said his son's name. "Among other things." Emma nodded, drank her coffee, did not fill the silence with anything unnecessary, which was not her natural instinct, but which she had learned from the man his father had raised, which was its own kind of irony. Sung-jin looked at the mood board above her desk. "You work in creative, fashion, PR. I just accepted a senior creative director position." Something moved across his face, brief and controlled. "At Lux Creative Group." "Yes." He processed this. Emma watched him process it. She could see him recalibrating something, not dramatically, just quietly, the way careful people update information. "Junho's company," he said. "My company," Emma said pleasantly and without apology. "He works there too." The corner of Sung-jin's mouth moved. It was not a smile. It was the involuntary precursor to one that he caught and set aside. Emma filed it away. The door opened. Junho walked in, stopped, and looked between his father and Emma with the expression of a man encountering a situation he had not prepared for, and was rapidly assembling a response to. "Father," he said, "your coffee is getting—" "You're cold," Emma said to Sung-jin, and stood up to get Junho a mug, because this was her apartment, and she was the host, and that was simply how things were going to go. The conversation that followed was in Korean for the most part, which Emma did not speak, so she excused herself to her desk with her laptop and her campaign notes, and worked with the focused efficiency of someone who was absolutely not listening to the tone of a conversation happening 8 feet away. The tone was careful, controlled. 2 people who loved each other and had not said so in a very long time and were not saying it now either, but it was there underneath everything. Junho came to her desk an hour later. His father had gone back to his hotel. He sat on the edge of her desk and looked at her. "How bad was it?" he said. "He had coffee. We talked. It was fine." Junho looked at her. "He's trying to understand," Emma said. "He came here because he doesn't understand, and he's not a man who tolerates not understanding things." She looked up from her screen. "He's very like you, you know." Something crossed Junho's face. "People don't usually say that." "People aren't usually paying attention," Emma said, and turned back to her screen. Sung-jin came to Lux Creative Group on Tuesday. He had a meeting with Park Ji-hoon. Legitimate, arranged, nothing to do with Emma. He did not know she would be presenting to the Hanyul clients that afternoon. He found out when he was walking past the large glass-walled conference room on floor 12, and stopped. Inside the room, Emma stood at the front of a presentation. Cobalt blue blazer, full campaign visuals behind her, 4 Hanyul clients across the table watching her with the specific attentive silence of people who are not distracted by anything because nothing is wrong. She was mid-sentence, one hand raised, making a precise point, and the room had the feeling of something being led rather than presented. Sung-jin stood at the glass for a moment, He had seen the sweatshirt, the cereal bowl, the bare feet in his son's apartment. He watched her field a challenging question from the client lead, directly, without deflecting, with the specific intelligence of someone who had thought 3 steps further than the question being asked. He watched the client nod. He watched the room follow her. He moved on before she could see him. The private meeting happened on Wednesday. Emma's office, her name on the door now, which was still new enough that she noticed it every time. Sung-jin sat across from her desk with his coat on, and his hands folded, and the composed expression of a man who had made a series of assessments and was here to deliver them. Emma sat behind her desk, with her hands folded in the same position, which she had not consciously decided to do. "I will be direct," he said. "I prefer it," Emma said. He looked at her. "My son has spent 20 years building something precise and purposeful. He has dismantled 3 weeks of careful groundwork in Seoul over a decision that began with—" he paused. "An elevator conversation." "It was a good conversation," Emma said. Sung-jin continued as though she hadn't spoken, which she respected. "What I see is a young woman who moves through the world as though consequence does not apply to her, who treats serious things lightly and serious people." Another pause. "Like puzzles she finds amusing." Emma let him finish. She had learned this from Junho. Let the whole thing land before you respond. "I don't think you came all this way to tell me I'm too fun," she said. "I think you came because your son pushed back on you for the first time in his life, and you need to understand what changed. And you're hoping that if I'm not enough, if I don't hold up under examination, then the answer is simpler than it actually is." Sung-jin said nothing. "I'm not going to be simpler than I actually am," Emma said. "I know what you saw on Sunday. Sweatshirt, cereal, bare feet. I know what that looked like to you." She held his gaze. "But I think before you finish your assessment of me, you should consider why your son, the most deliberate person either of us knows, keeps choosing me on purpose. Every time. Without being asked." She paused. "He called me at midnight from Seoul when everything was falling apart," she said. "Not his colleagues, not his board. Me. You raised a man who spent his whole life needing nothing from anyone. I don't think you should be worried about the woman he finally called. I think you should be relieved she picked up." The office was very quiet. Sung-jin looked at her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "I know," Emma said. "People make that mistake with me a lot. They look too quickly." She offered him more coffee. He accepted. Sung-jin did not leave the city on Wednesday as planned. He told his assistant to move his Thursday meetings and did not explain why, which was the kind of decision that did not require explanation when you were Ryu Sung-jin. He stayed in his hotel and worked and thought, and on Thursday morning walked into Lux Creative Group again, legitimately with purpose, and took the elevator to floor 7 for the first time. Emma was at her desk when he arrived. She looked up, registered him, and said, "She's not here yet, but Soo-yeon's office is—" "I'm here to see you," Sung-jin said. Emma looked at him. "I don't have a meeting scheduled." "I know," he said. "Do you have 10 minutes?" She gestured to the chair across from her desk. He sat. Around them the office moved at its normal pace. Kemi at her monitor, Adara on a call, the general productive hum of Floor 7 doing what Floor 7 did. Sung-jin looked at all of it, and then back at Emma. "I watched your presentation yesterday," he said. Through the glass. Emma went very still. "I didn't see you." "I know." He folded his hands in his lap. "The Hanul clients, the heritage section? That was your work." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "It was exceptional work." Emma looked at him. He said it the way Junho said things, not as a compliment, as a statement of observed fact. She understood immediately where Junho had learned that. "Thank you," she said. "I have been in this industry for 30 years, Sung-jin said. "I know the difference between someone presenting work and someone who understands what they built." He paused. "You understood every question that client asked before she finished asking it." "The brief was good," Emma said. The heritage material wrote itself once you found the right entry point. That is exactly what I mean, Sung-jin said quietly. You just gave the brief the credit. Emma said nothing. He looked around the office again. At her name, on the door, at the mood board visible through it, at Kemi, who had both headphones off and was performing very committed nonchalance 3 desks away. On Sunday, he said, I made an assessment. I know, Emma said. It was not complete, he said. It cost him something visible, not much. He was his father's son in that way, but something. I looked too quickly. Emma felt something shift in her chest. She kept her expression professionally open. You were working with limited information, she said. Sunday morning me and Tuesday afternoon me are the same person, but I understand why that wasn't obvious yet. Sung-jin looked at her for a long moment. My son called you from Seoul at midnight. Yes. He has never called anyone from Seoul at midnight, he said. In 20 years of business travel, not once. Emma held his gaze. I know. I am not a man who changes his position easily, Sung-jin said, but I am a man who updates his information when the information requires it. He stood. The Hanil work was exceptional. Your office suits you. He left before she could respond. Emma sat at her desk for a moment. Then she turned to Kemi. Kemi had both headphones fully off and was looking at her with undisguised amazement. Not a word, Emma said. Kemi put her headphones back on, but she was smiling, and she didn't bother hiding it. The dinner happened on Friday. Junho arranged it and disclosed approximately 60% of the relevant variables to each party, which was the most strategic thing Emma had ever seen him do, and she told him so in the car on the way there. You told me it was dinner with your father, she said. It is dinner with my father. You didn't tell him I was coming. He'll be glad you're coming. June. Emma. He glanced at her sideways. Trust me. She looked at him. He was driving with one hand, the other resting on the console between them, completely composed, and she thought, not for the first time, that the composure that had once been the most unnerving thing about him was now the thing she found most steadying. If this goes badly, she said, I'm ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. Noted, he said. The restaurant was the same quiet, beautiful place he had taken her to on their first date. Sung-jin was already there when they arrived, which meant he had been early, which meant he had wanted to be settled before they came, which meant he had thought about this more than he was going to indicate. He stood when Emma approached the table. She had not expected that. Emma, he said. Mr. Ryu, she said, you picked a good restaurant. The kimchi jjigae is the best outside Korea, apparently. Something crossed his face. He looked at his son. Junho sat down with the serene expression of a man who had made good decisions and was at peace with them. The dinner found its own rhythm the way good dinners do. Sung-jin was not warm. Warmth was not his register, but he was present in a way he hadn't been on Sunday or in the office. He asked Emma questions and listened to the full answers, which she noted and appreciated. She argued with Junho about whether the heritage framework could extend to a second Hanul product line and won the argument clearly and did not look at Sung-jin to see if he'd noticed, because it wasn't for him. He noticed. She asked Sung-jin about the founding of the Seoul division. Specific questions, the kind that required him to go back to the beginning, and she listened with the same attention she gave to client briefs, leaning slightly forward, following the thread. He found himself answering more than he'd intended. He found himself going further back than he'd planned. At one point he made a joke, dry and understated, the kind that required you to be paying attention, and Emma laughed immediately, genuinely, before Junho had even registered it. Sung-jin looked at her. You have your father's sense of humor, Emma said to Junho. Junho looked at his father. His father looked at Emma. He has never used it, Sung-jin said. I know, Emma said. I'm working on it. Sung-jin looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at his son. Junho was looking at Emma with the expression he wore when he thought no one was watching. Unguarded, warm, completely certain. Sung-jin picked up his glass, said nothing. But something had resolved in his face that had not been there at the beginning of the evening. He called Junho from his hotel at 11 p.m. "The dinner," he said when Junho picked up. "Yes. She argued with you." "She was right," Junho said. Silence. "She asked me about the Seoul division," Sungjin said. "The founding. She had done research." "She does that," Junho said. "She pays attention to things people don't expect her to." The line was quiet for a moment. "She laughed at my joke before you did," Sungjin said. "She's faster." "Than me," Junho said simply. Another silence. Longer this time. "She is not what I expected," Sungjin said. "I looked at Sunday and I saw the surface of her. I missed the rest." A pause. "That was my error." Junho said nothing. He understood his father well enough to know that this was the closest thing to an apology the man had in him, and it was enough. "Bring her to Seoul sometime," Sungjin said. He hung up before Junho could respond. Junho sat with his phone for a moment in the quiet of his apartment. Then he set it down and looked at the plant on the windowsill, the one Emma had inspected on her first night here, tilting her head at it like she was deciding if it was real, and smiled. The real one. The one that reached everything. He picked up his phone again and typed to Emma. "He wants to meet you in Seoul." She replied in 45 seconds. "I knew I'd win him over. I always win them over. Tell him I want the full Seoul tour. Then, also I'm very glad he came around, but just so we're clear, I wasn't going anywhere regardless." Junho read it twice. "I know," he typed back. "That's why I called you at midnight." Junho left for Seoul on a Sunday. Emma drove him to the airport this time without being asked, which was its own kind of statement about how much had changed since a Tuesday midnight phone call that had started all of this. She was on time. She had coffee. She was wearing actual clothes. He looked at her when she pulled up, and she could see him registering all three of these facts. "Don't," she said. "I didn't say anything," he said. "You were going to." "I was going to say thank you," he said. Emma handed him his coffee. "Go fix it," she said. "Come back." He took the coffee, looked at her for a moment in the specific way he had looked at her since an elevator, fully, without the composure layer. "I'll call you." "You better," she said. He got out of the car. She watched him walk through the departures entrance, charcoal coat, long dark hair, that jaw that still had its own dedicated section in a document on her laptop she was never going to admit existed, and then she drove back to the city and went to brunch with Toya and did not spend the whole time talking about him, which was a lie. She spent the whole time talking about him. The 2 weeks that followed had their own rhythm. Emma accepted the promotion officially on a Monday morning in Park Ji-hoon's office, with the composure of a woman who had been ready for this since a coffee-stained first day and a wrong elevator and 14 floors of stairs and one campaign that had changed everything. She signed the paperwork and shook his hand and walked back to floor 7 and sat at her desk, and Kemi appeared at her shoulder within 30 seconds. "Is it done?" Kemi said. "It's done," Emma said. Kemi made a sound that was not quite a scream, but was adjacent to one, and then pulled herself together and went back to her desk. Adora, who had heard everything, stood up from her desk across the floor, pointed at Emma, said nothing, and sat back down. Mireille walked over from her desk, placed one hand briefly on Emma's shoulder, and said, "It was always going to be you," and walked away before either of them had to deal with what that meant. Emma looked at her monitor, then at the nameplate on her office door, then at the small plant on the corner of her desk, the same one from her very first day, still thriving, which she chose to read as a sign. She texted Junho, "It's official." He replied in 2 minutes, "I know." "Congratulations, Emma." She stared at the message. "How do you always already know things?" "I pay attention," he said. "You taught me that." Emma put her phone face down on her desk and looked at the ceiling for a moment and felt completely, entirely, overwhelmingly fine. He called on a Wednesday evening from Seoul, which was the one call she had been waiting for without letting herself wait for it. "The board meeting," she said, picking up before the second ring. "Done," he said. "And," he told her, "the restructured role, a split base, soul and the city, permanent anchor here. It had cost him politically. He said it plainly without drama, and she heard underneath it what he wasn't saying, which was that it had cost him something with his father, too, in the room, in front of the board, choosing publicly for the first time in his life. "Your father called me," Emma said. "Yesterday." Silence. "He wanted to know if I liked Korean food," she said. "Specifically if I had ever had proper samgyeopsal, because apparently the version I would have had here doesn't count." The silence changed quality. "He gave me a list," Emma continued, "of restaurants in Seoul with notes. His handwriting is very neat. Emma, he also said, and I quote, that you have your mother's stubbornness, and it has finally been useful for something." She paused. "I think that's the nicest thing he knows how to say." Junho was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, something underneath the composure, that she had only heard a handful of times, the version of him that existed before the careful construction. "I'll be home Friday," he said. "Late." "I'll be up," she said. "You don't have to—" "June," she said. "I'll be up." A pause. "Okay," he said quietly. She was up. He walked into the office on Monday morning, and the whole of Floor 7 felt it before anyone saw him. The specific shift in atmosphere that happened when Ryu Junho entered a space. That quality of the room reorganizing itself around a new center of gravity. Emma felt it from her office. She did not get up. She finished the email she was writing, sent it, closed her laptop, and walked out to her desk at the edge of the open floor. He was crossing the room toward her. Charcoal coat. Long, dark hair, slightly undone from travel. The particular look of someone who had been through something and come out the other side of it having chosen. The whole floor was pretending not to watch. Nobody was pretending very convincingly. He stopped at her desk. They looked at each other across everything that had happened since a morning in an elevator when she had told him that elevators were vertical blind dates, and he had looked at her like she was something unexpected and filed her away somewhere he had never retrieved anyone from before. "How was Seoul?" she said. "Resolved," he said. "Good flight?" "Long." "Are you hungry? Adora brought pastries." "Emma," he said. She stopped. "Come with me," he said. The elevator bank on floor 7 had 4 lifts. He pressed the button and they waited, and when the doors opened, they stepped in, and he pressed the button for the lobby, and the doors closed, and it was just the two of them in the specific warm hum of a place where everything had started. Emma looked at the spot where she had stood that first morning. Visitor badge, coffee stain, straw still in her mouth. And felt the distance between that version of herself and this one in a way that was not sad, just full. Junho turned to face her. "I want to do life with you," he said. Simply the way he said everything true. Not the elevator version, or the office version, or the late evening version. All of it. "I want your plant on my windowsill and Toya's key under my mat and your campaign notes on my kitchen counter and your chaos in every room I come home to." He looked at her steadily. "I want you to come home to the same place I come home to. Permanently." Emma looked at him. "You want me to move in with you?" "I want you to be my person," he said. "Officially, completely, in writing if you need it." Emma looked at the elevator doors, then at him, then at the button panel where floor 7 glowed quietly, and she thought about a morning that had started with spilled coffee and ended with everything. "I have a lot of stuff," she said. "I know," he said. "My plant needs specific watering." "I'll learn," he said. "June." "Emma," his voice was even and unhurried and completely certain. "Is that a yes?" She looked up at him. This careful, composed, quietly extraordinary man who had laughed at her pottery disaster and taken her hand on a street without making it a production and called her at midnight when the walls came down and chosen her, every time, on purpose. "Obviously yes," she said. He pulled her close and kissed her, and the elevator opened on the lobby and neither of them moved, and the doors closed again and took them back up. Floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, and somewhere on floor 7, Kemi took both headphones fully off, looked at Adora, and Adora looked back, and neither of them said a single word because none were needed. On floor 12, in a glass-walled office, Park Ji-hoon looked up from his desk at the elevator indicator and allowed himself a small private smile and went back to his work. In Seoul, Ryu Sung-jin's phone buzzed. A photo from his son. Emma and Junho in the elevator. Her laughing at something. Him looking at her the way he looked at her. He studied it for a moment. Then he opened his contacts, found Emma's name. She had put herself in his phone at the dinner, he had not asked her to, and typed 2 words. Seoul. Soon. He set his phone down and smiled. And if you have been in this elevator since part 1, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for every comment, every share, every request for a part 2 and a part 3, every nestie who stayed until the end. This story is yours as much as it is mine. Drop a comment below and tell me, was this the ending Emma and Junho deserved? Like this video, share it with someone who needs a love story today, and subscribe because there are so many more stories coming, and you are not going to want to miss a single one. See you in the next elevator.